Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm really excited that you're here today. I'm going to present a short slideshow to lay out the different scenarios. I believe we have 7 scenarios as of this morning. Yesterday was the deadline. We started talking about scenarios 19 weeks ago. I know, I can't believe it either. 19 weeks we've been talking about scenarios, which is really an incredible amount of time. And so I'm going to share my screen, and also there will be links for you to get copies of these so that you can look at them in your time and really have time to study them. We're not going to be like studying them, but I'm going to go through them so that you know all the stuff that's out there to look for. Okay, I want to make sure everybody's sort of on the same page. And if I'm out of date, someone should tell me, because things are kind of happening quickly, given that yesterday was a deadline. Okay, so I'm just going to start with a little bit, warm us up. There's no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. And I think this is a really nice grounding by Margaret Wheatley, and we're going to discover what you care about, right, in this process. We're going to do a little warm up called the Values Waterfall. And I want you to write in the chat, don't send it. Please write in the chat a value that guides your best self. A value that guides your best self for today. If you could just write it in the chat, and I'm going to count to 3 and then press enter, okay? So I'll give you 2 more seconds to write your value. 2, 1, 2, 3. Send them. And you can look at all of everybody's values. Really nice, right? Really nice to look at all our values and what we're grounded in today. Empathy, kindness, awareness. Today we're going to be talking about 7 proposals. Well, we're not going to be talking about them per se. We're going to be listening to people and how they're feeling about the future of AEU. I just want to go over this. There's the regeneration proposal strategy that was a resolution put in by Susquehanna Valley. We have the keep the status quo. We have Northern Virginia, Hank Gassner's proposal, Bergen, Kirk Collier's. We have 2 proposals from the Washington Ethical Society and a proposal from Brooklyn. The regeneration strategy is a 12-month plan where you have an organizational development consultant that works with you to develop collaborative leadership skills so that there is a way in which power is decentralized. You have time to plan among all the societies, and they work you through that, building skills and through experiences so that you can actually discern where you want to go over the next 100 years. And I talked a little bit just now about collaborative leadership. It's creating and maintaining a system that includes all people involved. So it's not a top-down process, it's a collaborative process that everybody has a role. And that is what the regeneration process embraces as a leadership model. There's also a structure. I don't know if everybody got to look at this, where there's a transition governance formation, there's a team formation, and executive team formation. So there's many levels of participation available. The second one is business as usual, maintain the status quo, hire an executive director, and continue doing exactly what you've been doing. We have Hank Gassner's proposal from Novus, the scenario. And this is just, it's kind of half regeneration, half do what you want. So that was kind of their proposal. We have Kirk Collier's proposal, which is a 3-year plan looking at different types of projects that he's been involved with for many years in terms of focusing on youth development and different kinds of projects for raising money and projects that he's been involved with. So he has a lot of experience in that. Also, you don't have to look at this. There's a lot of numbers. This is really just to make you aware that Kurt and Hank and I have developed budgets across income and expenses. There's projections, there are assumptions, but we're doing our best to give you a sense of what we think it will cost the AEU. And they're all very much in the same ballpark, just so you know. There's also, and Trang helped put this together. Thank you, Trang. And Trang is also going to be co-hosting today a bit and helping us with the debrief. Thank you very much. Comparison chart, again, of Hank's proposal, Bergen, and the regeneration proposal. And the makers kind of outlined exactly, kind of in abbreviated form, a way to understand them. But of course, there's much more detail in all of these. Washington Ethical Society has also put in 2 proposals. This is one of them that reimagines the AEU, which is a completely society-led organization where there's no staff whatsoever, and the budget would be about $25,000. Another Washington Ethical Society proposal is a different model completely. We're suspending non-essential AEU operations. And again, Jake is going to put the link in the chat so that after this or whenever between now and the assembly, you would have time to look and study and consider and discuss these. And this is the Brooklyn proposal that basically looks at having a lot more time to consider this, even though we've had 19 weeks, to have another, I don't know, till December. There would be an election here for in June for July for the board members, and then a much longer period to decide this. They're not feeling that there's been enough discussion about the proposals. Today, we're going to do a fishbowl, which is what we've done before. It's a way for people to talk in large groups. And so basically, we're going to spotlight just 5 or 6 people max in the middle of, because there's not a lot of time, maybe 15, 20 minutes max in the fishbowl. And we're going to spotlight them. Everyone else is muted. And you listen for questions that you might have after that you want to ask to clarify. You listen to what was said, what excited you. You listen to what wasn't said. It's all of those things. You're listening, active listening. And then in the fishbowl, we're going to close the chat. Just a little, housekeeping. The chat will be closed during the fishbowl. And then there'll be afterwards time to debrief, which everyone will have a chance to ask somebody in the fishbowl a question, a clarifying question, or a question about something they said, which again would be a clarifying question. We really want to keep those to clarifying if possible. And we are going to hear today from ethical educators and board members, and board candidates. So it will be a really fun time. Again, there'll be a debrief and clarifying. During that time, Trang will be calling on people, and we will open the chat during the question and answer. But again, these are clarifying questions. So thank you for listening, and grateful to the salmon who do the impossible. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Thank you. Okay. All righty. I'm going to introduce our first fishbowl. And while I'm doing it, Jake is going to spotlight them. Audrey Kindred, from New York Society, has been in leading ethical education programming for over 2 decades. She currently runs programs for family, youth, and children at Ethical New York City, more formally known as New York Society for Ethical Culture. She's co-written a course with ethical leader Ann Clayson about humanist family life celebrations to be published this fall. She developed her ethical culture core working for many years with the esteemed leader Liesl Burns As an artist of dance, visual arts, and yoga, she came to this work originally as a teaching artist and coined the focus of her work through blogging, The Ethical Body. And she's participated in numerous ethical conferences and training, and she's currently completing a master's program at the Empire University. We also have Trish Cowen, is a member and former SEEK director of the Ethical Society of St. Louis. She's been involved with AEU since 2006, helping teens plan their YES conference since 2011, and working as AEU's Children, Youth, and Program Coordinator. Good morning. And our next guest is Julia Johansson. Raised in ethical culture herself, Julia currently serves as the Future of Ethical Society's liaison to the American Ethical Union and youth representative to the United Nations for the American Humanist Association. She recently completed her Master's of International Affairs from Columbia University, specializing in human rights policy, international conflict resolution. Prior, Julia worked at a nonprofit Immigration Services in the US, and she strives to carry her passion for restorative justice to the intersection of conflict transformation and policy reform, both domestically and internationally. Also today, we have Casey Slack. Casey is the senior leader at Washington Ethical Society. They also serve as Dean of the National Leaders Council and on the UUA's Election and Campaign Practices Committee. While in seminary, Casey worked as the youth coordinator at the UU Fellowship of Redwood City and as the student minister for religious education at UU Church of Livermore. Next, Kristen Hayden Safdie. Kristen is the Maryland native who moved to Virginia in 2011. She is grateful that she has found a community in Novus and from the opportunity to serve that community as the director of ethical education. She attends Novus with her 5-year-old daughter, Josie. Outside of Novus, Kristen works in learning and development, focusing on adult education. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here today. A couple of things I'm just going to put forth in terms of the circle, the fishbowl, is to try not to interrupt each other, be curious with each other, and be non-judgmental. This is a free space where everyone can be free to speak. It's a non-judgmental space. So I really encourage you to speak up, and this is your time, this is your voice, and really, really appreciate that for you being here today. So we're going to focus today with how do ethical education programs currently function in relationship to each other and to the American Ethical Union. And anybody can jump in, you don't have to raise your hand. This is your conversation.
I'll jump in because I don't want Trish to have to say it herself. We function in coordination because Trish does it for us. Trish organizes us to get together. We meet up, we have very candid conversations about the challenges that we're facing, how we're working to overcome them. It is so helpful. It's been so valuable because this is my first year as director of ethical education. I kind of come at this, I think I'm the most outsider person in the group. That might not be true, but I attended an ethical society, left for a while because I had a little kid, came back, pandemic happened, left again because of that. And now I'm back in with my now 6-year-old daughter who you might see. But Trish has really kept us going. And it's been a very collaborative and very supportive group because of that.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add anything? I'm going to go into a couple of other questions that you can jump in and, whatever resonates for you. Another question is, do you have a vision for ethical education in the future? I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how the structure we have perpetuates the lack of diversity that we see and what changes you'd like to see in the system.
I'd like to speak to that. I'm Audrey from New York Ethical. In our community, the most diverse part of the community is the children and families. And that is, I think, because we're meeting a need. non-judgmental about the entry. That is to say, we're an all-accepting space for families. And we've kept our program free. That's been, so our community of children and families has grown quite beautifully to be naturally diverse. And we're in New York City. That also, of course, matters. I think that I see the AEU. I have this picture I want to give. It's just an image. I see a lot of us have focused recently, paid attention to how the new science of trees and the mycelium web. I see the AEU as potentially the way I call my own society for New York City. I see the AEU for the larger ethical community as a mother tree, what I like to call a community. And that means that reaching out through its root structure, we have deep roots as an ethical culture, and we can easily forget that. But by unifying together, we are reminded of that and have actually a stronger base to build from. And we can therefore, really grow our expression from that. And when I link children to that deep root and tell them that this space it's an old space, an old place that supports them in this current time, and that they're here to take that forward in their own ethical development. There's a lot to say here, so I'm just gonna say that much for now. I wanted to plant that image of AEU as a community, a mother tree structure that feeds us through the mycelium root structure of ethical culture.
The kids really, those who touch the kids are the ethical ed directors. Some of them are for pay, some of them are volunteer, and it's very stressful for our educators and our societies to keep these programs going. It was stressful before the pandemic, and now it's rebuilding. So when the directors get a chance to come together and brainstorm and talk about the challenges that they're facing, it's really helpful for them. And the brainstorms are really fun. A lot of times our directors get ideas from one another. I think every time we meet, folks walk away with new ideas. And this year we did an all society platform. It's like a constant reinvention. Years ago when Audrey and I met, like 15 years ago, we were doing in-person, we called them religious ed conferences up in New York. And now we have the magic of Zoom. So we're able to meet several times a year and talk. And it's cheaper and easier. And then this year we did the January All Society platform, and that was really special for each of our programs to lend a voice to what they do in their programs. And that was a very meaningful way for our kids to connect, because they don't have interaction with anybody outside of their society in terms of these ethical education programs. Although Audrey does a great job of inviting folks regionally to programs, but a lot of us are just operating independently. And so these directors are the ones who really make everything happen and speak for the AEU also.
I have a lot to say, but I want to step back for others. So please step in, guys,
There's something else that's really big that the AEU does, like directly, overtly for youth, and that is the YES conference. Youth of Ethical Societies is what it stands for. And so that's been, I don't know how many decades that's been going on, a long time. We used to meet up in New York every year, and now it rotates between New York, St. Louis, and Washington, D.C. And the teams travel to each location once a year, and they get to see the community space, the building that each ethical society has, and they're powerful spaces to be in, each in their own way. And then they get to spend a weekend together tackling a really deep like ridiculously deep subject. I'm talking like racism in America, money. They've talked about the American prison system, public schools in America. They're ideas that the teens themselves come up with, and Julia has participated in that and been a leader in that. That's where we met, what, 15, 13 years ago?
Probably like 15 or more years ago.
Yeah, it's been a long time. And it's so cool to see young people connecting with the AEU and staying with the AEU because of that too. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Julia,
I just wanted to.
Oh, good, Julia.
Yeah.
Julia, could you jump in and talk a little bit about the FBS and, where you see it going in the future and why it's important to you or to the AEU? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I wanted to hear a little bit from you all before, because I am a little bit removed now from the ethical education time in my life. But yeah, so I grew up going to the Ethical Humanist Society of Chicago. I think I started going when I was 7 years old or something like that. My parents brought my brother and I for that purpose of having a community, a non-religious community, and growing, being taught good values, that kind of thing. For me, it was great. I really I liked it. I got really involved. My brother, I think he liked it. He got less involved. It's kind of just kind of random sometimes. But for me, the community, going every Sunday was really important. As a child, I mean, it might be different now, but as a child, it's not that kids were that mean, but they were a little bit mean about me being different and being an atheist or non-religious, and saying things like you're gonna go to hell. It's a joke, but that was a space for me, the society, where I could be with just like-minded people, kids, friends, and see those people every Sunday. So I loved going every Sunday. I loved doing all the activities, the crafts, the sandwich making, food depository volunteer shifts, fundraisers, things like that. And then I continued in the high school age, the Youth of Ethical Societies. And so I went to those yearly conferences that Trish talked about and loved them. It was super cool to meet more kids, because probably in our high school age, it was maybe 5, 6 of us. So it was super cool to go to, St. Louis is huge, just meet so many more kids my age that were like-minded and talk about real world problems that I was interested in and cared about. And I don't know what the status is now. I know that in Chicago, it kind of has fizzled out a bit. I feel like my high school cohort was maybe the last kind of strong cohort that liked to go every Sunday and kept it going and went to the Yes conferences. I'm not sure what the status is in Chicago right now. But going to the Yes conferences and meeting those people from other societies also made me interested in continuing on in the future of ethical societies after high school, and maintaining that kind of community in person was really important for me. And so I think I went the first or second year after I started college to the FES conferences and saw a need or a way to be involved in that. So I helped a little bit with planning, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? And I really enjoyed those. I was going pretty much every year, and then the pandemic hit. So we did a virtual one. It's kind of fizzled out. I'm not sure if we're going to go back to doing them every year in person. It was usually about 10 people anyways, sometimes new faces or old faces. But yeah, I think my experience is a common experience of someone who's grown up in ethical culture, really liked it, and for various reasons, our involvement has fizzled out a bit. I think there's various reasons for that. We can blame the pandemic. I think that's part of it. Also, kids are so busy these days. They have so many extracurriculars going on. It stresses me out hearing about what they're doing. So I can see how, they might want to sleep in on a Sunday. They might not want another chore or activity to do. And then, there's obviously room for the AEU to, obviously everyone can improve, support more. I'm not exactly sure, I know all of you ethical educators work together. I'm not sure exactly how it works with AEU. I think I would like be really sad if it all fizzled out, if the youth kind of just always, if this was just like no more. Like I got really sad when I heard that people in my home society, the high schoolers, weren't really going anymore. Because I think it was formative for me. And I think it's an important space to have. So sorry I'm talking so much, but yeah, just to wrap up, I think for me, community was really important. It is important, still important. I know I can get involved in New York. I haven't too much. And so I think that is, for me, it was in-person community. Others appreciate virtual, but yeah, I think there's room for improvement, and I'm excited to see all of you, because that means that people are working on keeping it alive. So yeah, thanks.
Can I chime in directly back to you, Julia, just for a second to engage?
Does anybody else have something to say? Because I know, Audrey, you have spoken. I was wondering if anybody else had anything to say to Julia.
I actually do, but it's not directly in response. It's kind of tangential off of something Julia said. So if what Audrey has to say is more direct, that might make more sense.
Well, go ahead.
Okay. I think Julia got to some of what I understand to be kind of the core issues of where we're at in ethical education programming. And also, like, I want to name that this is also where we're at in kind of religious education, kind of across the board in communities more like ethical culture than not. Where for a long time pre-pandemic, it was starting to not work. And the pandemic really kind of shook something so that what was always going to happen anyway happened a little faster. So when I was working in UU religious education in seminary, that was 2013, 2014, early 2015. And we were already deep into some conversations about what they call the death of Sunday school, which is that very like 1950s shape of everybody comes to the building on Sunday and then the kids go somewhere else while the adults go to platform. And then the kids have a whole other experience that is not really related to what the adults do. And at a time where everybody did that, it made more sense to do that. But as religiosity and membership in stuff has decreased pretty dramatically in the time period between when I was a teenager and now, and I clock myself as closer in age to Julia than not, people don't participate in things as much anymore. And when they do, often it is programming that their children are in that they have almost no control over the timing of. And something that I ran into a lot in California working with youth and children is that the less religious the society around you is, the less likely it is that your children will have time on Sunday morning to do anything. So we always ran into, right, kids' sports games were scheduled on Sunday mornings. And so what do you do with that? Well, it certainly isn't build programming that is a lesson, and they build on each other and you have to be there every Sunday. So some of the question for me, like the big questions are, what are we hoping to get out of engaging with our young people? Like what are we really trying to communicate to them? And are we thinking about their actual needs and experiences while we're doing this? It can be really easy to be like, well, I went to Sunday school and I loved it, or I sent my kids and they loved it, but these kids are not those kids. These new kids are different. And I think we really need to think about them and the moment we're in and what really matters to communicate to them. Not just, hey, we have programming, hey, we're doing it. If you're a family, you can come here. But like our values and that values matter is a big deal. I've taught sex education for a very long time. And one of the things that we talk about when we talk to parents in sex education is if you communicate your values, your kids hear it and they internalize that and they listen. And there is a lot of, I'm talking for a long time now, a lot of our society that does not talk about values explicitly. And one of the things that I think that we can do really well is talk about values explicitly and in a way that is thought through, in a way where we have not done, I'm sorry, I'm a clergy person by nature, so let me tell you a story very quickly. When I was a child, I really, really wanted to go to church. And so my mom took me to church after church in my little hometown. And I rejected each one of them out of hand because I wanted you to answer my questions. And all of these Christian congregations wanted to just dodge around the hard questions. So I think one of the things we can offer is something where we haven't dodged their questions. And we haven't said it's like that because that's how we do it. And when they have identified stuff in our programming that doesn't work, we have taken it seriously. So there's my little soapbox, and I will hop off it now.
Audrey, I do want you to be able to ask your question, but if I can build off of what Casey just said, because they made some really points that resonated with me a lot. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot this year is that we are often asking our kids to make a choice between ethical society, Sunday school, and a thing with their friends, something else. And what's happened is, Julia, you talked about how, you grew up, and I grew up in a similar place where I was the one non-religious kid. I was like the one atheist kid, just like bringing Modest Mouse albums around to my friends. Like, have you heard this? There's another way. But all the other kids were in Sunday school and I wasn't. Now we've almost created this space for our kids where they're the only kids who have to go to Sunday school every Sunday, and everyone around them is out having fun. And so the thing I've been thinking about a lot this week since we had our pre-call is that as the ethical educators for the AEU, we tend to be extremely responsive because our audience, the kids, they do not care about the AEU's legacy. They care about the philosophy in as much as we're translating it well to them and can help them care. But we have to be very responsive. And I don't think I'm like spilling too much tea because, Rachel, you mentioned earlier, we've been talking about these many options that have only grown in the past 19 weeks for 19 weeks. This is not a fast-moving organization, but the ethical education directors are out here daily making decisions, pivoting, figuring out different things to do. One thing that really stuck with me early in the year and gave me the space to say, okay, I have some agency over this program, was when Samantha Bergen, who I believe is on the call, said, we have all this wonderful curriculum and we're not using it because it doesn't make sense right now for our kids. And I thought, yeah, we don't have to use it. We can pull what works, but trying to deliver something the way we always have done it, because that's the way we've done it, doesn't necessarily work. Partly because, Julia, you were saying when you grew up, it was hard to find kids. And I grew up, I just had concerts to go to and I was like, okay, I found people. It's a lot easier to find people who are like you now as a kid. We're not the only place where people can meet other kids and say, oh, you didn't grow up religious? I didn't either. Let's form a connection. So we have to be more responsive, because I think as much as technology is impacting all of the AEU, it's impacting our world the fastest. And it means we have to be responsive. So that's my little soapbox. Audrey, I'll let you.
Well, when we talk about children's programming, I'm really interested in how children's programming, we're really talking about Julia. We're talking about actually all of us. All of us were children, and we still are. We're just more experienced and bigger. And I say that because when we talk about children and the development of our organizations, ethical culture, societies, each one of them, and the AEU, we often talk about children as if there's something like, I know they're developmentally different, but we've all been there. And I say that because for me, this is crucial for our whole communities, that we start working intergenerationally on a level of knowing that these are conversations, creative conversations we want to foster most kids and adults are segregated by age at every level of their development. The chance to be human together is so unique, and it's what we can offer. And how we do that needs a ton of creativity and dialogic structure and connection to not just the child, but the inner child of each person in our congregation. And when that happens, we, I think, can create strength. And I say that because that's something that often a lot of ethical culture communities have talked about this, how the children's programming and even the conversation around them gets siloed, into a separateness, a separate humanity. And I just want to offer that. Julia, when I wanted to say one of my biggest concerns, because I've now raised several generations, I feel like I've seen, the children I first taught, they're adults now. The question for me is, where is ethical culture for them? Now, they're not people who are going to join as independent members giving money to an organization. They don't have money to give. They don't see that. But they have this enormous root structure. Like Julia, they grew up in it. It made them. So our relevance to them is internal, and it's deep, and it's important. But where are we for them? And where are they in the world? Do we know? Are we helping raise them in actually what ends up being the toughest times of their lives, when they're not going to be a classical member? And I don't think we have a membership structure that really sees the young adult in their fragility and in their financial life and in their sense of belonging and rebelliousness, welcoming that. I mean, we are an ethical culture. I mean, come on, how much more of a sort of set of inner rebels can you get? And yet we're all so well behaved. But where are we to welcome people's inner revolutions? And where are we to welcome their traumas? A lot of people come here sort of in their dressed up space. But I feel like when we're talking about, and Julia, I don't mean to target you, I mean to just talk about your age, there's a lot of suffering going on in our youth and our young adults, and a lot of striving, and a lot of hope, and a lot of terror. And I feel when we're talking about children, that's just literally, those are the children. They just are one step above being recognized as children we take care of. And so how do we create membership structures that are developmentally inclusive and that admire the fragility and vulnerability of people as much as we admire the upstandingness of people?
Thank you all. Wow, what a great fishbowl. Okay, we're gonna pop you out and we're gonna do a debrief. Trang is going to call on people and we're gonna open up the chat. It was beautiful, and I really appreciate your time and energy this morning. Thank you so much, ethical educators.
Hey, thanks. Thank you again to our Fishbowl participants. Really appreciate that. So I'm going to ask, this is a point in time, I put them in the chat. This is time where we're gonna, provide a space for us to does anyone have any specific clarifying questions for the people in the Fishbowl, and any clarifying questions about ethical education in general? So I already see hands up from Sonia and Samantha. So if you have a question, please use your Zoom hand. That's the easiest to see. And you can use your physical hand. Hopefully I can see that as well, but your Zoom hand would be best. So go ahead, Sonia.
Samantha was first.
Oh, Samantha. Oh, you moved. Okay, Samantha. Thank you.
Okay, it doesn't matter. I just wanted to respond to what everyone was saying a little bit. Kurt Collier is the leader at the Bergen Ethical Society, and he created a program with us called Family and Friends, and it is adults and children together. It is twice a month, where we sit in a circle and have an activity, some sort of guiding idea that follows with the ideas of the day, if you will. It's not, we haven't formalized exactly like a progression of it, but it's always related to ethics and the environment and the world around us. But because the adults and kids participate together, it is creating a different kind of connection, the kind that Audrey was talking about. And it evolved out of need from the pandemic because we had to create a second program so that the older adults wouldn't be in the room with the kids due to COVID. And as that's ending, we're welcoming more adults in, and it's just like an alternative program to the regular Sunday. So I'm not sure that's a clarifying question, but it's just clarifying that it is another idea to put out there he came up with, and it's really working beautifully.
So one of the things we did.
Thank you, Samantha. Sonia?
So this is mainly for KC because of something that you were saying, but others are welcome to chime in. So KC, I have taught a lot of OWL, which for those of you who don't know about it is a sexuality education program. And one of the things it relies on is the idea of getting parental permission at the beginning of the year and letting them be able to look at the whole curriculum. And then it's really important that the kids bond through the year because they're talking about really difficult, complicated subjects. And, you know, by the time they get to talking about their best friend's abortion, they really need to have bonded, right? And at the same time, that doesn't really work too well when they've got soccer games every other week, right? And I wonder if you have any thoughts, Casey, about how we can modify the type of programming that we would think needed to have that kind of structure into something that would work if people were just coming, you know, every other week or once a month or whenever they happen to feel like it, or it was their very first time.
Yeah, it's a really great question, Sonia. And it's something I've thought about a lot because a lot of the programming we want to do, not just OWL or sex ed type curriculum, really, you really need an amount of time together to be able to have those kinds of conversations in a way that feels safe. And so I have several thoughts. One of them is regularity matters, whether or not it's every week regularity. So it might be a thing where, okay, what can you commit to? Where at the beginning of the year, if you're gonna do a type of programming that really needs bonding to work, what can you commit to? What sort of regularity can we really do? So I'll kind of talk about one of my experiences. I've taught OWL-based sex ed, mostly in schools, actually. But we also taught some classes for homeschooling groups, which didn't have space in their curriculum to see us every week or to see us as regularly as a private school or a public school did. So what we would say is, okay, this group, when can you regularly get together? And it would be several different homeschooling groups working together. And sometimes that was, okay, here are the 2 Thursdays a month that we can do. Or here is 1 Saturday a month that we can reliably do. And whatever it is that you can do reliably, you do it reliably. And maybe it takes a little longer to get to the place where you can talk about your best friend's abortion, but you get there. Another piece is, how do you build the container for any given meeting, right? Are we giving our young people the tools to make a space where they feel like they can be brave? Are we going through and saying, okay, we're going to have a conversation about how we're going to talk to each other before we have a conversation? We're going to have a conversation about what confidentiality means in this context before we have a conversation. Are we giving them enough time? Is it maybe the case that they need more than an hour? And are we asking them what it is that they need to really feel like that's something they can engage in? For like Sunday to Sunday programming, right? I think that we can do something a little different, which is you have whatever container is built by the people who are there, and you have a sort of regular practice of building what I'm used to calling covenant, but agreement will work as well. And then you have a practice of ice breaking, right? Of like appropriate to the level in the conversation ice breaking. Because if you start at, I just got here, and then go directly to, let's talk about systemic racism, I am an adult and I do that professionally, and that's hard for me in a room full of new people. I cannot imagine being 13 and showing up around some strangers and being asked to have real serious thoughts. So it needs to be fun first, and serious maybe second. I want the serious matters, but nobody gets to, and certainly nobody who is 7 or 14 gets to serious without getting to fun first. And West folks are actually probably pretty used to hearing this sort of thing from me. I think that in all that we do, it needs to be fun sometimes. They have enough like horrifying things going on that they need a moment for it to be fun and connective so that they can do it for real.
Thank you, Casey and Sonia. We have some great comments in the chat, but first I'll call on Abby, and then Rachel's monitoring the chat. She can share after that. That's okay. Okay, go ahead, Abby.
Thanks, Trang. One of the things that was noticeable during the pandemic is at the Washington Society, one of the few kids programming opportunities that kept moving forward was the Scout troop that we sponsor, which is notable. That was largely because it met outside all the time, but it was notable also that there is a non-age segregated element to that, and also some intergenerational connection. I'm also remembering just before the pandemic, maybe it was just after, actually, it was on the tail end. We have a coming of age program at the Washington Ethical Society, and we had a decent sized crop of students going through that. That was during the pandemic, but after quarantine. And that also is intergenerational because it's a thing that families and their teens participate in together, which provides opportunities for the teens to connect with each other, but also to connect with other adults in the program. And I guess my question is, I think about that, but I also think about in the 20 years that I participated in West before the pandemic, one of the functions of children's programming on Sunday morning was to make it easier for their parents to engage in platform, which was interesting to them. Now that doesn't mean that the kids programming has to be Sunday school, back to Casey's thoughts about fun and connection. But I wanted to ask for folks from other societies whether there were similar patterns you saw. Somebody talked about the family connection, which is awesome. I'm wondering whether similar patterns showed up for other societies during the pandemic.
Does anyone from the Fishbowl want to address that?
I think that ease for parents is a great need actually in our society. I think that parents are working very hard, and how ethical culture can be a supportive community to parents is a huge question. This is the question for the development of our groups, even during the pandemic. I want to say in those needs, one is like, giving them some time to have their own adult thoughts in an ethical context, and their own adult friends in an ethical context. But another is also giving them focused time with their children that has a values center where the values that they hold are glowing among other families, so that they as a family can go home and not feel alone, and have that dialogue between, so that there's some parent content supported for their dialogues at home. And finally, that a lot of children have, children over the decades have said to me that ethical was the only safe space for them. And for parents, there's nothing like finding a safe space for their child. And the other piece is that I believe that a lot of human beings face their first moral dilemmas of ethical questioning, self-questioning when they have kids, when they realize, my gosh, my child is not the perfect thing I thought it would be. It's not working out the way I planned. I'm not perfect. Oh my gosh. And that there's this moral quandary that comes, that I think that threshold of how can we help you in that, in your ethical parenting? I think that's the hugest question we can ask for that demographic, because when we're talking about children's programming, we're talking about families, not just children.
Thank you, Audrey. We have about a minute in this section. Does anyone else from the Fishbowl want to address what Abby brought up? And then I'll turn it back to Rachel. Okay, great. Rachel, did you want to share a little bit from the chat?
Yeah, there was a lot of questions and a lot of great dialogue in the chat. There was something about, are there other national programs and other, religious programs that we can look at, in terms of models to consider drawing from, continuing to seek ways the national group can tie in more with individual societies. That's from Jackie Davis. Thank you, Jackie. Did anybody in the Fishbowl want to talk about that briefly?
So what I would say, this is Casey, is that if ethical educators wanted to be in dialogue with UU religious educators, I know Loretta, which is their national professional body, is doing a lot of work around reimagining. And since those are curriculum that are not based on creed either, they are adjustable, right? And having the conversation together, I think, might serve everybody even better.
Thanks, Casey.
Okay,
Rachel.
Thank you, Trang. Thank you, Fishbowl. Thank you, educators. Okay, we're going to do another Fishbowl. We're going to shut off the chat, and we're going to, Jake is going to spotlight, and this will be for another 15 minutes, then we'll debrief. We're going to bring Anya Overmann, Jay Hooper, Khandra Sears, Anthony Cruz Pantojas, and Ken Novak into the Fishbowl. Hello, everyone.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon.